Welcome back. Today, we're talking to local authors about their paths to distribution. Now we're joined by Wake Forest-based author Nathasha Wells, who published her novel independently. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. Take us back.
Well, let's go back to maybe high school. I joined the military right after I graduated. So come summertime, within 2 weeks of graduation, I was in a recruiter's office swearing in to join the Air Force. And my parents were both military, so it wasn't quite a stretch, but for 10 years in active duty, it really opened up my perspective to what being an adult it was really going to be like. A big wake-up call. So my first day after graduating basic training was September 11th. So it really changed our entire culture, right? Did my first deployment, got to go overseas. And you know, as you start to gain all of these different life experiences, you come into contact with so many different amazing types of people and backgrounds and cultures. Fell in love with traveling, and I did about 10 years active duty. And I met my husband online. We can have a very long conversation about online dating if anybody's interested in what the early 2000s was like. But very quickly realized I'm ready to kind of become an adult. Like military adult and civilian adult is very different. So I joined the Guard, and if you know anybody who has joined the State Guard, it's a very cool experience because yes, you're in the military, but you're also serving your state, which was awesome. So I did that for about 11 years and just recently retired last year. So I have a background in instructional design, so my corporate side of my life has always been around teaching, education, writing, and when I turned 40, I decided I was going to write a book. So just reinventing myself over and over again.
Yeah, very cool. And did you always kind of have a creative itch? Had you always been writing in some capacity leading up to that, or is this something that developed later in life?
Writing has been fairly new. I have a graphic design background, so I've loved art and photography and all sorts of different creative mediums, but where I think the writing piece really blossomed was, you know, I have such a passion for video games, and we were setting up a D&D session at my house, and I'm creating this entire campaign, fake story, fake lives, fake characters, and I just started to go back to the time of when I was young and wanting to write stories and loving storytelling. I just decided I wanted to write a book. So I know some people like to have like a little journal they keep under their mattress for 10 years and then that story finally gets to see the light of day. It was a little bit different for me, not that I didn't love books. I think I've always been a reader first and then wanted to tell a different kind of story about the military, which I hadn't seen too much like that out there.
So you definitely wanted to weave in your experience in the military into this book, correct?
Yep.
And it's so can you tell us a little bit about the book, genre, and all the military aspects you wove into it as well?
Yeah, I started writing sci-fi from a military time travel perspective. So my debut novel is Icarus, and it follows a girl who joined the military right after September 11th, a little bit of my background there, but it goes away from that very quickly, but her experience around, you know, what it feels like to have a family. Like that found family trope is very interwoven into a lot of the stories that from the first book to the stories I'm writing now. I think that's so important that a lot of people can identify with, which is you may not always have the family you're born with. You don't always get that amazing twin, right? So how do you find your own community? And my main character, Kara, in the first book really comes to love this amazing crew as she's going on her own journey to discover herself and, of course, fall in love. So I decided to write romance after I really fell in love with the sci-fi elements, which I think is important.
Awesome. And so you set out to write a book, a novel, and you have a goal of publishing it. How do you initially first wrap your head around that whole idea, and how does that evolve along the way, all the way to a final draft?
It's amazing how accessible publishing is now. I think if you follow any people who were self-publishing 10 years ago, they'll tell you it's changed a lot, but it has made it so much more accessible for people who want to do it, because now Amazon is not your only option, which I think is amazing. And if you're interested in connecting with your local community, local bookstores and libraries are also an amazing resource to help you find that path. So if you're into romance, Kindle Unlimited is kind of the leader in terms of publishing. which is associated with Amazon. So I really started there and found that it opens up so much bigger than that. If you want to publish a story, you could make it as easy as publishing your PDF on Google Books, if that's what you want to do. So I think it really comes down to the genre. I knew where I probably was going to land just based on the genre that I was publishing into. But you have to just kind of create a little outline. What are my goals? What do I want to do? And in the very, very beginning, I didn't know what the end result would be in terms of where I was going to land with publishing. I kind of let that administrative piece come as the story was taking over, because there's a lot of different stages when you're deciding to write. If you need to put on your creative brain and your creative hat, don't overwhelm yourself with trying to figure out where is this book going to eventually go. I think a lot of that will come after.
And did you find that independent publishing, it maybe opened you up in different ways, it provided more freedom? What are kind of the benefits of going the independent route?
So with traditional publishing, it was never something I even considered, because I knew, I mean, if you look at the market now, the books that you are very excited to read from traditional publishers, this was on their docket years ago, and the authors have been sitting on that excitement, waiting to publish. You don't even know sometimes when the author's going to be releasing their next book. So there's absolutely benefits. If you want to have your book in the airport, you're probably going to need to go traditional publishing. But if you want to just reach your target audience, whoever that is, then indie publishing is absolutely an option. And for me, I said, okay, well, who's my target market, right? I wanted to put a romance book out there that had more sci-fi elements into it. There's amazing fantasy vampires and dragons out there right now, but I wanted something with a little bit more time travel, a little bit more military lens, and I felt like that was a niche that I could fill. And so it became very clear what path I was going to go, which in my case right now is Amazon and printing my own books and providing them to people who want them. I have lots of people who message me directly rather than going to like an online print on demand.
And are there different strategies that you've implemented, whether it's tools or different marketing strategies that you would recommend to people if maybe they're thinking about independently publishing?
Yeah, you know, social media I think is a really big player for so many people, but I would say don't discount what might work for you and your market. So for example, you know, I think a lot of people kind of discount Facebook because it's not as hip as maybe TikTok. And TikTok is absolutely something that you should look into because it's what's trendy right now. But you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. So I've worked on creating a presence on Facebook. I've also looked at email marketing and trying to determine if that's going to work for me. Lots of publishers now are creating sort of a magazine style and releasing episodes, which I think is also really incredible. There's a lot of really great places where you can distribute outside of some of these big box name brands. And what I'm going to be working on this year is going more local. I think that that's something that I was a little nervous to do when I first started. There's a big imposter syndrome when you're deciding that you want to write. And at the end of the day, you have to be your biggest advocate and you have to put your brand out there. So working on my own brand and creating that connectivity to people who maybe are not on social. We assume everybody's on Instagram, but they might not be. So,
so one last question I'll ask you. When you start out in any kind of creative endeavor like writing and you say, I'm going to write a novel, what did you experience from maybe your immediate support group and other friends, outsiders, when you say, I'm going to start to write a book? What was the reaction?
I mean, my immediate family were all in, right? I spent a couple weeks over the holiday break going, hey, let me just sit down on the couch and just type it out. And I think I probably had 2/3 of it done because I had this idea sitting in my head. And now when I tell people, I'm so much more brave about that. You know, when you're in the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm an author. But then as you get more confident, you are much more like, hey, I wrote a book and I have copies with me now, right? Wherever I go to make sure that I can hand that out to people. For me, it's been very empowering to know that I sat down to create a story about a woman who came into her own and to be able to share that with other women who need that, who went through a traumatic experience and came out on the other side in a really positive way. So to me, it's not just, yes, I'm a writer, but I hope that my story resonates with people, and I'm very proud to share that story arc of a character that has meant something to me, but I know that'll mean a lot to other women as well.
Yeah, that's great. And so what are your goals for the future? Some things that we can look forward to, and also how do people find your book?
Yeah, 2024 is going to be exciting. Icarus is the first book of what I believe is going to be a trilogy. So book 2 is coming out this year. I'm almost done with that. And last year I sat down and wanted to play around a little bit with paranormal romance. So I have that book is done, just needs to be edited and published. So my goal this year is 3 books. We'll see. I've got 2 in the pocket, so that's feasible. And I think the other big part for me, now that I know that I can write, I've met my goal, I've published a book, I can do that. I've proven to myself I can do that. And so this year is going to be about identifying my brand and creating something that when you look at my website, my book, my stories that I tell, I want it to be really clear who I am. And I hope to create more of a community around that sense of style of genre, which is, I think, what it's all about, right? Connecting with people and readers, and so I'm very excited to work on that this year. And my handle on most accounts should be author Natasha Wells.
Awesome, cool. Well, go ahead and check her out. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for sharing everything you learned about independent publishing. I'm sure it'll help a lot of people out. And thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed today's show. If you have any questions or would like to know more, please visit our websites at raleighcw.com and myrdctv.com. I'm Josh Powell, filling in for our host, Bill LeMay. Thank you for watching Community Matters. We'll see you next week.